So it seems that Guerrilla Games is currently hiring for a multiplayer centric project. Now, I think this is something we've known about for a little while, but ever since Horizon Zero Dawn released, which I know a lot of you guys really want me to play, and I've said it many times, I'm going to play it. Don't worry, I will get there eventually. It's something that I am actually really looking forward to based off of how much excitement many of you have surrounding the idea of me actually playing it. So I just want to make sure that when the time comes, there's really no other distractions. I can be just fully focused because I'm expecting an amazing experience at the very least. But ever since Horizon Zero Dawn came out, it seems like Guerrilla Games has really kind of elevated themselves as a studio, as a team of developers, and they've really kind of set the bar significantly higher for whatever it is that they're going to bring out next. Now, I think most of us are thinking that it just makes the most sense for them to be working on a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, which is most likely the case. But let's read a little bit here and then talk about it. So it says, we know Guerrilla Games is working on something, though it's been shrouded in secrecy ever since Horizon Zero Dawn released back in 2017. However, a recently discovered job listing may suggest that at least part of whatever the Sony-owned studio is working on will have a key multiplayer component. The job listing is work on an unannounced title, while the job itself is for a Java-focused role. It's the job details that have gotten people talking. Here are some key points in the listing. You will build a robust backend that can scale up to serve many concurrent users. You will work on systems like matchmaking, tournaments, clans, and leaderboards. You will work on systems to test and deploy a new server set without downtime. You will integrate the game servers with PlayStation Network and other third-party services. It definitely looks like something Guerrilla has planned will involve multiplayer. Back in 2018, the developer hired some talent who worked on the multiplayer-centric Rainbow Six Siege, hinting that Guerrilla was cooking up a multiplayer project. Those announcements came off the heels of a massive expansion. Rumors have also persisted that Guerrilla split into two teams, though that remains unconfirmed. If Guerrilla is indeed beefing up for a multiplayer game, the question now is, what kind of game will it be? It's been presumed that the studio is working on a Horizon Zero Dawn sequel, though nothing has been officially announced yet. Could that have a multiplayer component to it? It seems unlikely, but anything's possible. We haven't seen a new Killzone since Killzone Shadow Fall launched with the PlayStation 4. A multiplayer-centric game from Guerrilla definitely screams Killzone, but maybe the studio would rather launch a new IP. We likely won't learn about this unannounced title for a while. There's even a possibility this could be a PS5 title, which I would think it is. First-party Sony games haven't really dabbled in multiplayer, especially as of late, so this could be the first sign of a new push for Sony Interactive Entertainment. So I wanted to read all of this here because I think not only did the article do a good job of kind of summarizing everything here, but what it said there at the end in particular about this potentially pointing towards a new move that Sony is making. Here's the thing. I think when people think of PlayStation and multiplayer, I do think that Killzone is probably one of the games that kind of stands out because it's really one of the only multiplayer-based games, or a game that had a heavy emphasis on the multiplayer, being an FPS that Sony's really pushed over the years and has kind of stuck with and has to an extent been a success for them, And then we see what Guerrilla does, like the type of shift they make from Killzone to Horizon Zero Dawn. So the natural question that people have here is, what are they doing next? And this idea that they are expanding their studio, which there's clearly a lot going on with Guerrilla Games ever since the success of Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't think Sony expected that game to be just as successful as it was. And I don't think many people expected that. And so, like I said, because they're now elevated as a studio, Sony now realizes, okay, we need to pump more money into this studio. We need to expand the studio because this is a talented studio. And the idea that they're working on multiple projects here, one being an unannounced multiplayer game, and the other also probably being a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, which is not announced either. I think it's safe to say that if this is the case, even if it is just one project, let's say this is just Horizon Zero Dawn 2, and they're going to have a massive multiplayer component, I think that would throw a lot of people off because it just seems really unexpected. And, when you think about what Horizon Zero Dawn is known for, obviously not the multiplayer, because there is no multiplayer component to it. It's a single-player RPG. But if this was the case, I think these are going to be PlayStation 5 games, or if it's just a single game, a PlayStation 5 game. The fact that they are looking for a lot of talent to bring on board that deals with multiplayer games, maybe this could actually be a Killzone game that's, they're gearing up to kind of bring out during the PS5 launch, similar to what they did with Killzone Shadowfall. Now, I say this not in the way that, they're doing this instead of Horizon Zero Dawn. I think it makes a lot of sense for Guerrilla Games to expand and to have one team working on a multiplayer-focused Killzone, because believe it or not, there's a lot of fans of Killzone. There's a lot of people who want to see Killzone return, but there's just as many people, maybe even more people, who certainly want to see a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn. So you have to think, why not both? Why not expand Guerrilla Games, hire new talent, and give them the time they need to maybe work on both? Here's the thing. A follow-up to Horizon Zero Dawn is going to have to be very significant. Guerrilla Games and Sony both understand that in order to, based off of what we know, or based off of what I know from Horizon Zero Dawn, they're going to have to really put the bar on another level, and that's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time. So maybe Guerrilla Games knows this, and they know that they're going to need to take a lot of time to work on Horizon Zero Dawn 2, and it's certainly not going to be ready by the time the PS5 launches, probably in late 2020. So maybe they have this second studio that's going to work on a brand new Killzone title, and maybe it will be easier to get that out of the door closer to around the time the PS5 launches, or within that time frame. And they want to, again, do something similar to what they did with Killzone Shadowfall. Now, would people be excited for this? Yeah, I think so. I don't think anybody would be upset over a new Killzone, especially if, if Guerrilla Games is just kind of going to do some things differently that maybe we haven't really seen them do. I'm sure they've learned a lot from Horizon Zero Dawn. It's just a matter of what can they apply from that game to the Killzone series. It's hard to say because they are two very different games, but I think people would be excited for that. And to finish off this video here, the one other thing I did want to point out is what I alluded to earlier, where at the end of this article it says maybe this is showing Sony kind of shifting things a little bit. Well, we have to understand, we did talk about, I think it was last month, maybe even the month before that, but it was recently, I know that Sony does plan to make more multiplayer-focused games, but people don't have to freak out because that doesn't mean it's coming at the expense of single-player games. Sony understands that their bread and butter right now is those cinematic, narrative-driven single-player experiences that really you can't get many other places. There are some other publishers that are doing this, but really Sony has been the one to really go full force with this, by putting a lot of money into these games and showing just how successful they can be when they're given the right amount of time and resources. So they're going to continue that, but they did emphasize that going into next generation, they do want to try to expand and have some more multiplayer offerings on their platform. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with this, because you have to understand that multiplayer does offer something that single player just simply can't, just like single player offers something that multiplayer simply can't. They're two completely different beasts, and I'm the type of person that likes to enjoy both experiences, right? Like, I like having my single-player games. I played Resident Evil 2, and I loved it, and I thought it was great, and it was one of the best gaming experiences I had of 2019 so far. But I also am really enjoying The Division 2, right? Like, these are very different games, almost polar opposite games, but I've enjoyed both to a great extent. And I think both can exist. And as long as Sony just stays focused and they don't, lose sight of this idea that people want single-player games. That's what people are buying PlayStations for. They want to see the narrative and the story, and they just want to have that immersive experience on their own. as long as they can still like keep that the way it is, and then they want to expand from that and also do some new multiplayer things, you know, like exactly what we're seeing here with Guerrilla Games. If this is true, if Sony's like, hey, why don't you guys do a massive expansion, almost basically hire a second studio, have this studio work on a new Killzone, and then we can have our main team working on a Horizon Zero Dawn 2. To me, that sounds ideal. Why not both, right? I think that it would be a really good thing for Sony to do this if this is in fact what they're doing, and it kind of gets me excited because I never really got into Killzone. I think I dabbled in it a little bit in the past, but I never got into it. But I would definitely be willing to give it a proper go. You know, if say they have a launch title during the PS5 or something like that when it launches. But either way, guys, yeah, it seems that regardless, you know, putting everything else aside, putting all speculation aside, Guerrilla Games is hiring for people to come on who have experience with making multiplayer-centric games. So it could be one of two things. It could be a new Killzone, or one of three things: a new Killzone, a new IP that's multiplayer-based, or a massive multiplayer component that they're building out for Horizon Zero Dawn 2. I think any three of these things are possible. It's hard to say which exactly is most likely. I think the final thing I'll say here is I think if it is a second game and it's not a multiplayer component to Horizon Zero Dawn, it's much more likely it will be Killzone, because I do think Killzone has been successful for Sony. It just hasn't reached the heights that they want it to, but I think because it's a known brand, you know what I mean, and there is still probably a loyal fan base there, there's a chance that maybe they would go with that and try to, you know, grow it even further. But yeah, that's going to do it for the video, guys. I just thought this would be interesting to talk about, the idea that Guerrilla Games is hiring all this, you know, all these multiplayer developers for a new project or an unannounced project. Could be Horizon Zero Dawn 2, could be Killzone. We really don't know. You let me know down in the comments below which you think it is, what you would want it to be. I will be interested to see what you guys have to say. Be sure you leave the video a like if you did enjoy it. Really helps it out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. It all helps tremendously. But until next time, guys, take care.